Morning Critical Analysis. We are in week 14. We are almost done. So I know that's both a relief and maybe exciting, not sure. So this video is for Tuesday, April 21st, again, the beginning of week 14. So just a couple quick reminders. Due last week, if you have not already turned it in, was due your Chapter 9 papers. So your text sheet and the vocab quiz in Dropbox. So those were both due last week. I will still accept them. I'm still taking them. If you haven't turned them in already, just please make sure that you submit them. I also had extra bias practice in there that was not required, but if you wanted to do extra practice, you could kind of send it to me and I'd give you feedback. But please make sure you get those Chapter 9 papers in. In a previous video also, we had thesis homework. Some of you have already sent that to me, but you are still welcome to send that. And then just kind of a general reminder, just be going back and making sure that you've completed all your work for all the other chapters. I have been sending out weekly emails individually to you to say, hey, here's what I don't have from you yet. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page, making sure that you have everything. All right, so we are going to jump into Chapter 10 today. What is nice about Chapter 10 is this is actually obviously the last chapter, so we're just about done, but there's no real brand new information to go over because Chapter 10 is considered our combined skills chapter. So it is just a summary of everything we've done already. So that's why kind of the lecture, so to speak, portion of this video will go fairly quickly and we'll jump right into the text with the text sheet and the vocab. So this chapter is about political science, specifically the American government, which again is always kind of fitting, it feels like, especially in an election year, just to kind of be aware, know what's going on with our democratic process. So that's why you'll hear a lot of these stories will have to do with government issues, with immigration, discrimination, democracy, those kind of things. So this chapter, as I mentioned, is the combined skills chapter. So it's going to just basically real quickly have you practice and remind you of all the things we've done throughout the chapter, from vocabulary down to author bias. So the PowerPoint kind of walks you through just a couple slides of like, hey, do you remember when we talked about vocabulary and we focused on using context clues? Context clues meaning like synonyms, antonyms, logic, examples, definitions. So using the context, the sentences surrounding an unfamiliar word or idea to help you figure out the meaning. We also talked in the next couple chapters then about topics and main ideas, who or what a paragraph is about, and then what you're supposed to be learning about that topic. And then supporting details, we talked about major and minor details. Major meaning they directly support the main idea. Minor meaning they directly support the major detail. So we talked about that in the supporting details chapter. From there, we moved on to making inferences, which went along with implied main ideas. You know, when an author suggests or implies something, we have to then infer it and put it into our own words. We come to that conclusion. And then purpose and tone. Why did the author write this? What is their attitude toward this particular topic? And then it wrapped up the last kind of basically chapter 6 through 9 with the critical thinking, you know, fact versus opinion. Can it be proven or verified, or is this someone's beliefs? What argument is the author promoting and how are they supporting their argument? What kind of facts are they giving, or emotions or stats? Patterns of organization, how are they organizing their writing? Are they comparing, contrasting, classifying? And then author bias, you know, what is the attitude? Are they positive or negative toward this? And then the rest of the PowerPoint kind of talks about KWL reading strategy to use before, during, and after reading. Like I said, this part is kind of quick because it doesn't teach anything brand new. It's basically just kind of reminding you of all the things we've already gone over throughout the entire textbook. So it just serves as a kind of quick review. So I am going to go ahead and get into our textbook. So we're going to open up our text. And while the textbook is opening, I'm going to get into our Chapter 10 folder. And oops, a little far down. We're going to get out our study guide, because I am going to use that. It should open up for me down there. And then I'm also going to get out our text sheet. We're going to be working with both of these materials today. So those are both uploaded, both ready for you to use and work on. All right. So we'll come back to the text here shortly. In the meantime, we're going to get into our text. We're in chapter 10. Again, political science, specifically the American government. So if this is an area of interest to you, I know not many of you are going into a field that is going to directly correlate, although if you are going into education, criminal justice, human and social services, a lot of the legislation passed will directly affect your field. It affects a lot of fields, but a lot of those fields, you kind of like healthcare, you see a lot of that impact more so from what the government does. So there are some kind of, that little introduction as well as those basic questions at the beginning that I would normally pose to you and have a kind of a quick discussion with you. So feel free to kind of look at that and look around. But we are going to go to our first part of our text sheet, which is going to be over on page 544. And it's going to be under exercise 10.3. So if I'm looking at my text sheet, here it is. It's questions 1 through 10, but you can see it's not all the questions. And I'm going to do the good part of it with you and have you just do a couple on your own. This is kind of reviewing our vocabulary chapter, specifically synonyms and antonyms. So I'm not even going to have you worry about that word bank because you're not even going to really use that word bank because as you can see, the words in bold are the words up here. And so you're not using the word bank to get the answers. So let's do a couple together. Number 1 says U.S. relations with oil-producing countries and violent crimes committed in countries around the world have caused student activists and intellectuals to take politics seriously. So it wants to know a synonym for activist. So activists we will see and talk about in this chapter. Activist is basically kind of similar to another word we've talked about in a previous chapter, an advocate. That would be a good synonym, an advocate. They are trying to actively fight, actively promote, actively go for something. Number 2, once elected, Obama gained bipartisan support for legislation involving healthcare law, tax credits for low-income workers, and subsidies for childcare. They want to know a synonym for legislation. Again, synonym meaning the same or nearly the same. If you think about legislation or the legislative branch of our government, it basically has to do with laws, making laws. So legislation would be kind of the process of laws, proposing, making laws. Number 3, throughout the campaign, Obama identified his top 3 priorities as ending the war in Iraq, increasing energy independence, and working toward providing health care for all Americans. A synonym, again, for campaign. Now, this is one of these words where campaign is like, oh, I know what a campaign is, but how do you kind of come up with a synonym for it? One way to think of it is an operation, because if you think, when candidates are campaigning, they are operating. They have like a list of things they have to do, what they can't do, what they should cover, what they shouldn't cover. It's kind of this operation that they're running. Okay, now we're going to look at number 5. We're skipping over to 4. Number 5, non-citizen voting is the suffrage movement of our time. Now, here they're going to throw this in, so we want to pay attention. We want an antonym for suffrage. An antonym for suffrage. Well, suffrage, as we'll see in this chapter as well, means the right to vote. So they want an opposite antonym of that. There's a word for that. Disenfranchisement. That's the word for the opposite of the right to vote, being disenfranchised. So historically, unfortunately, our country has a history of disenfranchising some of its citizens. A certain point of time, you had to be basically a white male because you had to own land. And then, African Americans eventually got the right to vote. Women got the right to vote. So historically, our country has disenfranchised a lot of people, and thankfully that's no longer the case for most people, although one of the stories in here will talk about some people who are still disenfranchised. All right, number 8, the American self-image has always harnessed the creative tension between pluralism and assimilation, a synonym for pluralism. If you think of the word pluralism, you might think of the word plural, which means many, and they're talking about people, not necessarily the amount of people, but the fact that there's many different kinds of people. So diversity is kind of a good way to think of that as well. All right. You are going to do 9 and 10 on your own. I'll just point out real quickly that number 9, you'll read the sentence and they want the antonym for authority, so the opposite of authority. And number 10, they want a synonym for conflict resolution. So make sure 9 is the antonym for authority, 10 is a synonym for conflict resolution. And that is part A of your text sheet. So I did most of it with you. You're just doing a little bit there, 9 and 10 on your own. Okay. So from there, we are going to actually go down a little bit to part 2A. And we're going to go to this story called Give Non-Citizens the Right to Vote. It's Only Fair. And this starts over on page 554. And so, let me get there over here. And that is going to be reading number 2. We're going to get there. Okay, so it talks about how this is the next group of people. They're talking about being disenfranchised. People who are not necessarily citizens, but maybe they've been in the country for a long time and they're not having this right to vote, even though they are paying taxes. They can be given tickets, so they don't have the right to vote though. So I'm going to ask again that you kind of pause the video, and it's a relatively short little article here. Give non-citizens the right to vote. Go ahead and read that, and then once you unpause, we will go over the questions and the vocabulary with us. All right, hopefully you have paused and read that article, and now we are going to go through the words that you would have seen in that particular article to make sure that you're okay with those. So we will start on the front side of our study guide. You would have come across the word lobbying on page 554. The word lobbying, page 554, means working to influence a special interest. You might have heard of lobbyists previously in, Washington, the Capitol, people who work to influence a special interest. On 555, you would have seen the word inequities, just kind of what it sounds like if you know what inequitable means, lack of fairness. It's not fair. Inequity, there's not fairness. Page 556, we have suffrage, which we saw in our first part of the text sheet. Suffrage means having the right to vote. So people fight for suffrage, means they're fighting for the right to vote. Page 556, we have the word inclusive, which is, again, kind of just what it sounds like. Including all, it covers everyone, to be inclusive. Maybe you've taken a vacation where it's all inclusive and everything is covered. And then also on 556, although it's mentioned a couple times throughout the article, is the word clout, to have an influence. Clout means have influence. Like if you have clout over something, you have some pull, you have some influence. Okay, then we are going to look at these questions right here, 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 10, that go along with our reading of the Give Non-Citizens the Right to Vote. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit past the short answer questions, and I'm going to answer a good deal of these with you. Number 1 says, in the sentence, there's another tactic increasing immigrant clout by allowing all non-citizens to vote. That also deserves serious consideration. We just kind of talked about the word clout. So if you have clout, that means you have influence, and for some reason they just printed the word or the letter B there twice. But number 1 is B, have influence. So clout means influence. I'll go back. All right, we are doing number 3. In the second paragraph, it says, but what most don't know is that the right to vote in this country has never been intrinsically tied to citizenship. A synonym for intrinsic. So intrinsic, if you've heard of this word before, is kind of like internal, something that's within you. Or in this case, they're talking about having a right to vote means it's not a natural right. It's never been intrinsically, it's never been naturally tied. So number 3 is C, naturally. Okay, skipping to number 5. It can be inferred. So which one of these can we infer from the article? That the author holds a neutral view on the issue of immigrant rights? Well, just by looking at the title, they are not neutral. They want non-citizens to have the right to vote. So they are not neutral in this case. So that is not a good inference. Are they against the idea of letting more immigrants in the U.S.? That's really not what this is about. Has mixed feelings? Or believes that voting rights are an essential element? I would say D. If they want everyone to be able to vote, they believe that these are a pretty essential part of the democratic process. So we would say number 5 is D. Okay, then we're going to look at 6. Why does the author make reference to the exclusion of women prior to 1920, African Americans before the Voting Rights Act, and 18-year-olds before 1971? So why are they trying to kind of compare? Remember, the whole thing is about how immigrants or non-citizens should have the right to vote. And I mentioned this previously, that each of these groups has basically not been allowed to vote in the past, just like non-citizens are today. So that was the whole purpose of bringing up those groups of people, is to kind of draw that comparison so that we could see that point that the author is making. All right, why does the author want to illustrate by mentioning Maryland, Chicago, and California in paragraph 9? So paragraph 9, I'll kind of read it while you look at those options. It says, there are now a handful of U.S. jurisdictions where non-citizens have a right to vote in some elections. In 6 towns in Maryland since the 90s, all residents, except for felons, can vote in local elections. Chicago permits all non-citizens' parents of school children to vote in school district elections. In California, all parents can participate in parent trigger votes. So what does it appear that the author is doing by pointing those out is that there are some exceptions, that some places in Maryland, Chicago, and California are allowing exceptions to that rule of non-citizens not being allowed to vote. All right, and then number 10, I might as well finish this out with you. Which of the following statements would the author most likely to support? So if you look at that, what is the author kind of going to be supporting? Hopefully not that more studies need to be done if they're worthy of being able to vote. I would say that A. He's trying to rally people. He's trying to really rally people and say, hey, speak out. If you agree with this, say something. Let's make it happen. All right. From here, we are going to go ahead and look at the article right underneath it. Should the voting age be lowered? So again, it's going to be talking about kind of another group of people who are maybe, if you want to consider like disenfranchised, younger people who may want to vote is what this article is going to focus on. And so this is on page 568, reading number 4. So I'm going to get there. And again, I will recommend that you go ahead and pause. It's going to ask about, how do you think about this? Are young people apathetic? And the article just goes down. It's separated a lot by vocabulary, down to there. So I'm going to say, go ahead and pause that. And then we'll come back and talk about the vocabulary and the questions that go along with it. All right, hopefully you have paused it and read, and especially those that a lot of you in this class are fairly young, so it would have affected you at some point, if voting, if you ever felt like voting was something that you were really passionate about, but you couldn't wait till you're 18 to vote. I don't know. So we're going to talk about a few of the words that you would have seen there. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to look right here on page 569. So we will get to these other words right here, but we're going to go here. Page 569, unanimity. Everyone agrees. It kind of looks like unanimous, right? Kind of reminds me of the word unanimous. It's like everyone is agreeing. Everyone believes. It's kind of one mind. Everyone feels like, yeah, I agree with that. Down a little bit more on the next page, page 569, we have manipulated. It doesn't sound like a good thing. If you're manipulated, it's like you're being influenced or controlled in a very clever way, or maybe in an unfair way. Page 569, we have the word deference, which means just to have respect. If you have deference for someone, you're showing them respect. Page 570, we have the word spawned, which always makes me think of this movie from like a long time ago called The Spawn of Satan. I don't know why. Anyway, spawned means to make something happen or cause to exist. So spawn, like we spawned an idea. We came up with an idea and then we made it happen. It came to existence. Page 570, then we have the word protesters, those who are against something. So protesters are those who are against, they disapprove, they object. So they're going to kind of fight against something. So those are the vocabulary words from that particular reading. And then on the text sheet, you're going to be answering short answer questions. So I'll scroll down here and you're going to be reading questions 1 and 3 to answer. Questions 1 and 3. And this is on your text sheet here at the very bottom. You'll see it's short answer 1 and 3. And question 1 says, here's this little quote. Young people are tired of being treated like second-class citizens in America. They are tired of facing oppression at the hand of adult American society. They are tired of unconstitutional age restrictions. They are tired of being stereotyped for the media as violent, lazy, stupid, and apathetic. Above all else, young people want to be a partner in the political process. They want the right to vote, to have a voice in the American democratic process. All right, so do you think that most young people share this desire? Do you think that most young people are sick of not being able to vote? Like 14, 15, 16-year-olds want to get out there and vote, as argued, or do you think they simply don't care about the political world? So number one, you really can't go wrong as long as you support your answer. Do you think young people are really interested and curious and passionate about the democratic voting process, or do you think they do not care, and why? That's number one. Number three says the fact that people have been denied the right to vote for the first 18 years of their lives have given them a sense of powerlessness when it comes to voting and civic participation. What is your reaction to this provocative argument? Do minors in America feel powerless? So it piggybacks in a way off of number one, but do you think minors in America feel powerless? Basically, kids, do they think they feel powerless because they don't have a lot of these same voting rights and rights in general that adults do? So that's what you are putting down for 1 and 3. And just make sure you support your answers. Make sure you go through and give support to those. All right. So before we head up to our part B at the top there, I want to talk about the biography, because some of your vocabulary terms will come from the biography in this chapter. So we're going to look at page 563. Page 563. Go down here and I'm going to scroll down. Here we go. This is on Barack Obama. So at the time this book was published, he was just out of office. Or maybe he was just finishing his presidential second term. All right, so I would encourage you to go ahead and read the profile. Just kind of give some background onto Obama. And again, remember, this is the American government chapter, so that's why they chose the most recent president at the time to kind of highlight, since it goes along with the American government chapter. But as you go through here, we will see several vocabulary terms. So let me pull up the guide again. And in this reading, we have the word tenants on page 563, and that just means people who live somewhere. Tenants in an apartment, people who live there. You also see on page 563 the word litigation. That means taking legal action. So to litigate, that's why a lot of authors are called litigators. So litigation means taking legal action. Page 563, subsidies is when money granted to people as assistance. So if you want to think about someone who might have to apply for welfare or things like that, it's kind of like a government subsidy. And then page 563, stimulate, to encourage interest or activity. The good example is the stimulus that they just sent out. That is supposed to be encouraging the economy, to people to put money into the economy to kind of help the economy, as well as help people be able to kind of pay their bills. So stimulate, encourage activity or interest. So those are all in the Obama biography there. So that completes that first side of the text sheet. So then we'll fill out the rest of this here in just a few minutes. All right, so the last thing we have not talked about is the TED Talk. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the TED Talk. I'm also going to show you if you Google the title, Dance to Change the World, here it is. It's about a little under 17 minutes long. If you're more interested in listening to the TED Talks than you are reading them, this is a little different. She uses a lot of analogies and things in here to talk about issues, or you can read the article here. Now, in this article, we come across our last set of vocabulary. So let me pull that up one last time here. So we do come across our last set of vocabulary. So this goes from activist down. Activist is someone who's trying to bring change. And it's implied they are actively doing so. It's not just, oh yeah, that would be great. They are doing something about it. They are actively out there doing something to bring change. Petition means a formal request. So if you petition a grade, you're making a formal request to kind of look at that. You can make a petition to have signatures to try to change something. But petition in general just means you're making a formal request to do something. Inquiry is when you have a question. You want to look into something. You're curious. So you have an inquiry. You pose an inquiry. Jaundice is yellowing of the skin, often caused by a disease in the liver. There's other ways you can get jaundice, but it's a lot of that yellowing of the skin. Endorses means to support. Usually, again, we see this right now in the election cycle. A past president will come out and endorse the candidate from the same party, and they're kind of giving their stamp of approval. And then skirmishes on page 583 means like there's a disagreement, fighting, disagree. It's a skirmish. So that is your chapter 10 vocabulary. So we've now gone over all of that. And so while we're kind of talking about that, here's your chapter 10 vocabulary quiz, your very last vocabulary quiz. That's exciting. Yeah, maybe. So you open up your chapter 10 vocabulary quiz. Again, hopefully at this point you know exactly what to do. Get in there, and there is your correct or incorrect. One of them is fine the way it is. Part B, make sure you answer the question, not just define the word, but answer the question. And then your fill in the blank. Your chapter 10 vocabulary quiz, you'll see it's Dropboxed right there, is going to be due this Friday, April 24th. And that's going to help me take week 14 attendance. So please make sure you are working on your chapter 10 vocabulary quiz. All right, and then wrapping up the text sheet, after you read The Dance That Changed the World, you will see that you were answering 3 short answer questions on page 585. So page 585, and I'll talk about those here just to give you some clarification. I'll scroll down. Okay, page 585, you are answering questions 1, 3, 4. 1 says, she talks about a story with a one-eyed monkey. Basically, what's that mean? Why? Why does she bring up? It's an analogy. It's kind of like a little way to demonstrate something. But what's the point of the one-eyed monkey? Question 3 says, how did her mother inspire her? So how did her mother inspire her? And it talks a lot about dancing, obviously, because it's kind of in the name of the title. And then question 4, she speaks of a violence gene. It's that little gene. It's small and it's mean. Too small for detection. It's in your built-in protection. Do you agree that we all contain a seed of violence? If yes, how can we best contain that? So her argument is we all have the capability of being violent. It's just kind of how that seed is watered. So do you agree with that? And then if so, how can we kind of contain that? All right, so that is your chapter 10 text sheet. You'll answer those questions right there. When you are all done, back in Blackboard, there's a Dropbox right there. That is also going to be due Friday, April 24th for week 14 attendance. Okay, so to summarize, a couple last summary here. You are submitting, if you have not already, please make sure you've really anything 6 through 10 at this point. All text sheets, all vocabulary quizzes, all homework assignments. I have been emailing you, letting you know what you have due, what is missing. So please make sure you get those in because we are wrapping up very quickly. Chapter 10, due this Friday, your Chapter 10 vocabulary quiz and your Chapter 10 text sheet. Also due this Friday, Mastery Skills. Mastery Skills Assessment, right in there. Guys, use my videos. Seriously. I put those in there for a reason. I'm still seeing people go in and they're not doing well in a skill, and I'm thinking to myself, why? When I basically walk you through the skill, which tells me that not everyone's watching these videos, which I know some of them are more time consuming, but these are really kind of quick and to the point. So you have to have all 10 of these done by Friday, April 24th. And remember, you need an 80% or higher average on all of them. So even if you don't do well on 1 or 2, the rest of them will kind of help pull that up. So make sure you submit that. Finally, your chapter 6 through 10 vocabulary test. Here it is. Here's the folder for it. Here is your study guide. I'm going to pop that open here. And this covers, normally, again, we would have taken this in class in week 14 or 15. Here's your study guide. All the words from chapters 6 through 10 that'll be on the 6 through 10 test. So you can have that up, print it, take a picture of it, whatever you need to do. And then the actual test and Dropbox is right here. So I'll pull this up. Here's your chapter 6 through 10. As a reminder, it's just like 1 through 5. Part A, part 1, page 1, you are just answering the question. So just answer the question. So don't tell me, oh, alienated means. No, what is an example of someone who is alienated? Don't just tell me what aspire means. Describe a goal that you aspire. So answer the question. Okay, make sure you answer that. Part B, correct or incorrect. 2 of them are fine as written. So the word correct should only appear twice. The rest you need to fix somehow. Leave the underlined word the same. Adjust the rest of the sentence. And then part C, fill in the blank. Your chapter 6 through 10 vocabulary test is due April 28th. So April 28th, Monday, April 28th. So that can start wrapping things up with that. Okay, so that kind of brings this video to an end. I know that, sorry, Tuesday, April 28th. I knew when I said that, that sounded funky. Tuesday, April 28th is when your chapter 6 through 10 vocabulary test is due. So make sure that you are getting that completed as well. I'm losing track of my days, guys. I don't know if you are as well, but I'm forgetting what day of the week it is. I'm forgetting what week it is in general. All right, so I will put all of this into an email to summarize and make sure that you know exactly what's due when. Please reach out if you need anything. Have a great day.